My name is Jake, and 3 months ago, I had 2.3 million followers. Today, well, let me show you. 847. That's what's left of an empire that took me 5 years to build. But this isn't just about numbers disappearing from a screen. This is about watching your entire identity crumble in real time, and discovering that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what actually matters. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I woke up in my penthouse apartment overlooking the Hollywood Hills, the same view that used to make me feel like I'd conquered the world. My phone was buzzing nonstop, but something felt different. Usually, notifications meant brand deals, collaboration requests, fan mail. This time, the messages had a different tone. Jake, you need to see this. Bro, what were you thinking? This is bad, man. Really bad. A video had surfaced. 2 minutes and 37 seconds of a private conversation from 2 years ago, taken completely out of context, edited to make me look like everything I'd spent years proving I wasn't. Within 6 hours, I watched my follower count drop like a stone thrown into deep water. 2.3 million became 2 million, then 1.8, then 1.2. The comments section turned into a battlefield where I was the enemy. Brands started pulling out. My management team stopped returning calls. Friends who used to fight for spots at my dinner table suddenly couldn't remember my number. But here's what they don't tell you about falling from grace in the digital age. It's not just about losing your audience. It's about losing yourself. For 5 years, I'd measured my worth in likes, shares, and subscriber counts. I'd built my entire sense of self around being wanted, being watched, being relevant. When that disappeared, I didn't know who I was anymore. I remember standing in my kitchen that first week, staring at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. The silence was deafening. No notifications, no comments to respond to, no content to create. Just me, alone with thoughts I'd been too busy to hear for years. The media storm was relentless. Entertainment blogs picked apart every video I'd ever made. Twitter became a courtroom where I was tried and convicted daily. Former collaborators posted carefully worded statements distancing themselves from me. People I'd considered friends acted like I'd never existed. My apartment, once filled with the constant buzz of success, became a tomb. The walls that had witnessed celebration parties and brand meetings now echoed with emptiness. I'd sit on my couch, scrolling through comments from people who used to worship me, now calling for my complete destruction. The worst part wasn't the hate. It was the indifference. Watching people move on as if I'd never mattered. Seeing other creators fill the space I'd left behind. Realizing that in a world obsessed with the next big thing, yesterday's star becomes today's cautionary tale faster than you can say, unsubscribe. I started wearing hoodies and sunglasses everywhere, not because I was famous anymore, but because I was infamous. The few times I ventured outside, I felt like everyone was staring, judging, whispering. Paranoia became my constant companion. But this story isn't about the fall. It's about what happened after I hit the ground. It's about discovering that sometimes the people who matter most are the ones who have no idea who you used to be. It's about learning that real connection has nothing to do with follower counts and everything to do with someone seeing your heart when everyone else only sees your mistakes. It all started with a girl at a coffee shop who had absolutely no idea who I was. And that simple fact, her complete ignorance of my former life, became the foundation for everything real I'd ever experience. Because sometimes, losing everything fake is the only way to find what's actually true. Her name was Emma, and she worked at this little coffee shop in Venice Beach called The Daily Grind. It wasn't the kind of place influencers usually went to. No Instagram-worthy neon signs, no perfectly arranged succulents, no Wi-Fi password written in trendy chalk lettering. Just worn leather chairs, mismatched mugs, and the kind of authentic atmosphere that actually encouraged people to talk to each other instead of their phones. I discovered it 3 weeks after my world collapsed. During one of my aimless drives around the city, I'd been living like a ghost, ordering everything online, avoiding any place where someone might recognize me. But that Tuesday afternoon, desperation for human contact finally outweighed my fear of being seen. I walked in wearing a black hoodie pulled low and sunglasses that made me look more suspicious than invisible. The girl behind the counter had paint under her fingernails and wore a vintage band t-shirt that looked genuinely lived in, not strategically distressed. When she looked up at me, there was no flash of recognition, no subtle phone grab to take a secret photo. Just a warm smile and a simple question. "What can I get you?" I ordered a black coffee, my voice rusty from days of silence. She studied my face with genuine concern, the kind of look I hadn't received in months. Are you okay? You seem really stressed. The question caught me completely off guard. For weeks, the only people who'd spoken to me were lawyers, former business partners delivering bad news, or strangers online telling me I deserved everything that happened. Here was someone actually asking about my well-being. Just a rough patch, I managed to say. Those are the worst, she replied, handing me my coffee. But they don't last forever. I'm Emma, by the way. Jake. Well, Jake, I hope tomorrow's better than today. It was such a simple interaction. But walking back to my car, I realized I was smiling for the first time in weeks. Not the practice smile I'd perfected for cameras, but something real and involuntary. I came back the next day, and the day after that. Each visit, Emma and I talked a little longer. She told me about her art degree, how she was working at the coffee shop to pay for her studio space. I found myself sharing stories about photography, my original passion before the followers and brand deals took over. We talked about books, about the way morning light hit the ocean, about her dream of having her own gallery someday. What struck me most was how she listened. Really listened. Not the performative listening I'd grown used to, where people waited for their turn to talk or for the perfect moment to ask for a selfie. Emma asked follow-up questions. She remembered details from previous conversations. She treated my thoughts like they mattered, not because of who I was, but because of what I was saying. You know, she said one afternoon while sketching in a worn notebook, you have really interesting perspectives on things. You should share them more. If only she knew how much I'd shared, and how catastrophically that had ended. The contrast between my conversations with Emma and my former life became more stark each day. I remembered networking events where every interaction was transactional, where people's eyes would dart over my shoulder looking for someone more important. I thought about friendships that existed only in group chats and collaborative content, relationships built on mutual benefit rather than genuine connection. With Emma, there was no agenda. She didn't want anything from me except my company. When she laughed at something I said, it wasn't because she was trying to get closer to my platform or my connections. It was because she genuinely found me amusing. You're different from most people who come in here, she told me one rainy Thursday. Most people are always checking their phones, always somewhere else in their heads. You're actually present. The irony was devastating. I was present because I had nowhere else to be. My digital world had evaporated, leaving me with nothing but the here and now. But Emma saw it as a gift. 3 weeks into our daily conversations, I realized something terrifying. I was falling for her. Not the shallow attraction I'd experienced with other influencers who understood my world, but something deeper. I was falling for someone who knew nothing about my past, who liked me for reasons that had nothing to do with my former success. But with that realization came crushing guilt. Every day I didn't tell her the truth felt like a betrayal. She was sharing her real self with me while I hid behind a carefully constructed version of who I used to be before fame changed everything. You know what I love about you, Jake, she said one evening as she was closing up the shop. You're so genuine. It's rare to meet someone who's just completely themselves. The words hit like a physical blow. Here was this incredible woman praising me for the very thing I wasn't being. Authentic. I was living the biggest lie of my life, and she was falling for it. As I drove home that night, I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I could disappear from her life, protect her from the inevitable disappointment of learning who I really was. Or, I could risk everything by telling her the truth. But first, I had to figure out if what we had was real enough to survive the weight of my past. It happened on a rainy Thursday that started like any other. I'd been living in this beautiful bubble with Emma for 3 weeks, pretending I was just Jake, not the Jake who'd lost everything, not the Jake plastered across gossip blogs, just a guy who loved photography and made her laugh over coffee. That afternoon, Emma was showing me her latest painting in the back room of the coffee shop. It was a stunning piece, swirls of blue and gold that somehow captured the feeling of hope emerging from darkness. She was explaining her technique when the bell above the front door chimed. Emma, you'll never guess what happened at... The voice stopped mid-sentence. I turned to see a girl about Emma's age standing frozen in the doorway, her eyes locked on me with unmistakable recognition. My stomach dropped like a stone. Oh my God, the girl whispered. You're Jake Morrison, the influencer who what? Emma looked between us, confusion clouding her features. The roommate, Sarah, I learned later, pulled out her phone with trembling hands. Within seconds, she was showing Emma article after article, video after video. The scandal, the fall, the complete destruction of everything I'd built. I watched Emma's face change in real time. Confusion gave way to recognition. Recognition to hurt. hurt to something that looked dangerously close to betrayal. So everything was a lie? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut deeper than any hate comment I'd ever received. Emma, please let me explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for 3 weeks? That while I was telling you about my dreams and my art, you were just… what? Slumming it with the normal people? It wasn't like that. I never meant for… You never meant for what? For me to find out? For me to discover that the guy I've been falling for doesn't actually exist? The word falling hit me like a physical blow. She'd been falling for me too, and I'd ruined it before it even had a chance to begin. Sarah was still scrolling through articles, reading headlines out loud like accusations. Influencers' controversial comments spark outrage. Brand deals cancelled as creator faces backlash. The rise and fall of Jake Morrison. I can't believe this, Emma said, backing away from me. I actually thought you were different. I thought you were real. I am real. Everything I told you about myself, about how I feel. How you feel about what? About having a good laugh at the naive barista who didn't know who you were? About how easy it was to fool someone so pathetic? Emma, no. You're the most incredible person I've ever met. These past 3 weeks have been the most honest I've been in years. Honest? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't even know what that word means. I tried to step closer, but she held up her hand. Don't. Just don't. I need you to leave. Emma, please. Leave, Jake, or whoever you really are. I stood there for a moment, watching the woman I'd fallen in love with look at me like I was a stranger. Worse than a stranger. Like I was exactly the kind of person she'd spent her whole life trying to avoid. The walk to my car felt like a death march. Behind me, I could hear Sarah's voice, probably filling Emma in on every sordid detail of my public destruction. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. For the next 4 days, I didn't leave my apartment. I'd lost my career, my reputation, my friends, and somehow I'd survived all of that. But losing Emma felt different. It felt like losing the last piece of who I could have been. I drove by the coffee shop twice, but never went in. What would be the point? I'd proven exactly what she now believed about me. That I was just another fake person in a city full of them. On the 5th day, I was sitting in my car outside the daily grind, working up the courage to go in and apologize properly, when someone tapped on my window. My heart stopped. It was Emma. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing an oversized sweater that made her look younger and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. "We need to talk," she said. I rolled down the window, afraid to hope. "I've been thinking about what you said, about being more honest these past 3 weeks than you'd been in years." She paused, studying my face. "I want to understand what that means. Before I tell you what Emma said next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone see the real you when everyone else only saw your mistakes? If this story is resonating with you, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, because what happened next taught me the most important lesson of my life. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear it, because sometimes the person who saves you is the one who chooses to see past your worst moment to find your best self." Emma stood by my car window for what felt like an eternity, her breath visible in the cool morning air. When she finally spoke, her words changed everything. "Get out of the car, Jake. We're going for a walk." I followed her down to the Venice Beach boardwalk, my heart hammering against my ribs. The ocean stretched endlessly before us, indifferent to human drama, while early morning joggers and dog walkers went about their routines. Emma walked in silence for several minutes before stopping at a weathered bench overlooking the waves. "I didn't sleep for 4 days," she said, not looking at me. "I kept thinking about everything you told me, about your love for photography, about feeling lost, about wanting something real. And then I thought about the person I've been getting to know for 3 weeks." She turned to face me then, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness exactly, but something like understanding. Sarah showed me everything, the videos, the articles, the comments, all of it. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the hurt underneath. "And you know what I realized? I don't care about your followers or your scandal. I care about the guy who spent 3 weeks asking about my art and actually listening to the answers." The relief that washed over me was so intense I had to grip the bench to steady myself. "But," she continued, and my heart sank again, "if we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need complete honesty. No more secrets. No more half-truths. I need to know who you really are, not who you think I want you to be." "Emma, I'm not finished. Her voice was firm but not unkind. I've been thinking about why you didn't tell me, and I think I understand. You were probably tired of people wanting something from you, tired of relationships that weren't real. But lying to me wasn't protecting either of us. It was protecting your fear. She was right, and hearing it said so clearly was both devastating and liberating. You're right, I said. I was terrified that if you knew who I was, you'd see me the way everyone else does now, as this cautionary tale, this fallen star who got what he deserved. And what if I had? What if I'd judged you based on headlines and gossip? Would that have been my loss or yours? The question hung between us like a challenge. I'd never thought about it that way. That someone's inability to see past my mistakes said more about them than it did about me. Everyone deserves a second chance, Jake, but you have to want it. You have to be willing to do the work to become someone worth that chance. Over the following weeks, Emma became my anchor in ways I never expected. She didn't try to fix me or solve my problems. Instead, she held up a mirror that showed me who I could be if I stopped running from who I'd been. You know what real influence is? She asked one evening as we painted together in her tiny studio apartment. It's not about how many people follow you. It's about how deeply you impact the people who choose to stay. She was teaching me to see beyond the numbers, beyond the validation I'd craved for so long. When I told her about my financial struggles after losing brand deals, she didn't offer pity or solutions. She simply said, "Maybe this is your chance to remember what you actually value." Emma suggested I volunteer at the local youth center, where she taught art classes on weekends. These kids are dealing with their own social media pressures, she said. Maybe your experience could help them navigate it better. The first day I walked into that community center, I felt more nervous than I had before any major brand presentation. These teenagers didn't know my name, didn't care about my former fame. They just saw an adult who was supposed to help them. Mr. Jake, a 15-year-old named Marcus, asked during our first session, "How do you know when something you post online is worth it?" The question stopped me cold. Here was this kid, probably dealing with the same pressures I'd faced, looking to me for guidance. And for the first time in months I had something valuable to offer. Not my success story, but my failure story. You know, Marcus, I spent years posting things because I thought they'd make people like me. And you know what I learned? The stuff that gets the most likes isn't always the stuff that matters most. Emma watched from across the room as I talked to these kids about authenticity, about the difference between being seen and being known. Later, she told me it was the first time she'd seen me truly comfortable in my own skin. "You're different when you're helping them," she said as we walked home that evening. "You're not performing or trying to impress anyone. You're just being useful." That word, useful, meant more to me than any compliment I'd ever received about my content. But the real test came when Emma asked me to meet her parents. "They know everything," she warned. "About your past, about the scandal, about everything. If you can handle their questions, you can handle anything." As we drove to her childhood home in Pasadena, Emma reached over and took my hand. "You know what I love about you, Jake? You're mourning the death of someone you never really were. And that's making space for someone much better to emerge." I squeezed her hand, finally understanding what she meant. The person I'd been before the fall wasn't worth mourning. He was worth learning from. 6 weeks after my world collapsed, I sat in front of my camera for the first time in months. My hands were shaking, not from nerves about going viral or getting views, but from the weight of what I was about to do, tell the complete truth. "My name is Jake Morrison," I began, looking directly into the lens. "And I want to tell you about the best thing that ever happened to me. It started with losing everything." The video wasn't polished. No fancy editing, no perfect lighting, no carefully crafted thumbnail. Just me, sitting in my nearly empty apartment, talking about failure, growth, and a girl who saw something worth saving when everyone else saw wreckage. I posted it with 847 followers. By the end of the week, I had 3,000. But these weren't the same kind of followers I'd had before. These people commented with their own stories of loss and redemption. They shared their struggles with authenticity in a digital world. They weren't there for entertainment. They were there for connection. Emma was hesitant about appearing in my content at first. "I don't want to become part of your brand," she said. "I want to stay part of your life." "What if there's no difference?" I asked. "What if my brand just becomes my actual life?" So she appeared occasionally, naturally, never performing for the camera. Viewers fell in love with her authenticity, her art, her gentle wisdom. But more importantly, they fell in love with the version of me that existed when she was around. Calmer, more thoughtful, genuinely happy. The youth center work became a cornerstone of my content, but I was careful never to exploit it. I shared the lessons I was learning, not the kids' stories. I talked about how helping others had helped me understand the difference between influence and impact. You know what's funny? I said in one video, filmed after a particularly meaningful session with the teenagers. I used to measure my success by how many people wanted to be like me. Now I measure it by how many people I can help become more like themselves. The comments on that video brought me to tears. Parents thanking me for giving them language to talk to their kids about social media pressure. Teenagers sharing their own struggles with online validation. Former influencers reaching out to say they were reconsidering their own relationship with fame. But growth wasn't linear. There were days when the hate comments still stung, when I questioned whether I deserved the second chance I was building. Emma had a way of sensing these moments before I even recognized them myself. "You're spiraling again," she said one evening, finding me staring at my phone after a particularly brutal comment thread. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't deserve this platform, this audience, this what? This chance to help people? This opportunity to share what you've learned? She sat beside me on the couch, taking the phone from my hands. "Jake, you can't control what people think about your past. You can only control what you do with your present." She was right, as usual. The next day, I made a video about dealing with criticism and self-doubt. It became one of my most watched pieces, not because it was entertaining, but because it was necessary. My relationship with Emma deepened in ways I'd never experienced. We weren't building something for the cameras or the comments. We were building something real, something that existed in quiet moments between videos, in conversations that would never be content, in the simple act of choosing each other every day. "I love watching you become yourself," she told me one morning as we painted together in her studio. "Not the person you think you should be, not the person you used to be, just you." 9 months after my fall, I had 50,000 followers. But more importantly, I had something I'd never had before. A community built on genuine connection rather than parasocial relationships. These weren't fans. They were people on similar journeys, sharing their own stories of growth and authenticity. The financial struggles were real. I was living on a fraction of my former income, but somehow I felt richer than I ever had. Emma and I would cook dinner together instead of going to expensive restaurants. We'd spend evenings reading instead of attending industry events. We'd take long walks on the beach instead of flying to brand activations. You know what I realized? I said to Emma one evening as we watched the sunset from our usual bench. I spent years building a life that looked successful from the outside, but felt empty on the inside. Now I'm building something that might look small from the outside, but feels infinite on the inside. She leaned against my shoulder, her paint-stained fingers intertwined with mine. That's the difference between being famous and being valued. The youth center program we'd started together was growing. Kids were learning not just about social media literacy, but about self-worth that existed independent of online validation. Emma's art therapy sessions were helping them express feelings they didn't have words for. "Mr. Jake," Marcus said during one of our sessions, "you're like proof that messing up doesn't mean you're messed up, you know?" That night, I called my parents for the first time since the scandal broke. They'd been trying to reach me for months, but I'd been too ashamed to face their disappointment. "Son," my dad said, his voice thick with emotion, "we've been watching your new videos. We're proud of who you're becoming. Even after everything I did, everything I lost, especially because of it, you're finally the person we always knew you could be." As I hung up the phone, Emma wrapped her arms around me from behind. "See? Sometimes losing everything fake helps you find what's actually real." 1 year after my world fell apart, I realized I wasn't mourning my old life anymore. I was celebrating my new one. Today marks exactly 1 year since everything fell apart. Emma and I are sitting in the daily grind, the same coffee shop where she first asked if I was okay, where she had no idea who I was, where everything real in my life began. But this time, I'm not hiding behind sunglasses and a hoodie. This time, when people recognize me, it's not with disgust or pity. It's with something I never expected to see again. Respect. "You know what's crazy?" Emma says, stirring honey into her coffee. "A year ago, you walked in here running from yourself. Today you're finally running toward yourself." She's right. The man who stumbled into this coffee shop 12 months ago was a ghost haunting his own life. Today, I'm more myself than I've ever been. My channel has grown to 150,000 subscribers, but these aren't numbers on a screen anymore. These are real people sharing real stories. Yesterday, A mother wrote to tell me that my videos helped her teenage daughter navigate social media pressure. Last week, a former influencer reached out to say my content inspired him to rebuild his platform around authenticity instead of algorithms. But the moment I knew everything had truly changed came 3 months ago, when I decided to propose to Emma. Not for content, not for views, not because it would make a good story, simply because I couldn't imagine my life without the woman who chose to see my heart when everyone else only saw my mistakes. I planned it here, at the Daily Grind, where our story began. The same barista who'd watched our relationship unfold was working that day. Emma thought we were just having our usual coffee date. "Emma," I said, my voice shaking with nerves that had nothing to do with cameras or comments. "You saved my life in this coffee shop, not by fixing me, but by seeing me, by choosing to believe that who I was becoming mattered more than who I'd been." When I got down on one knee, she started crying before I even opened the ring box. "Jake Morrison," she said through her tears, "you're the most real person I know." Yes, of course it's yes. The other customers started applauding, and for the first time in years, being the center of attention felt like a gift instead of a burden. Our wedding was small, intimate, real. No brand partnerships, no sponsored content, no carefully curated guest list. Just the people who mattered, celebrating love that had grown from the ashes of everything fake I'd ever built. The youth center program Emma and I started has expanded to 3 locations. We're teaching kids that their worth isn't measured in likes, that influence means inspiring others to be their best selves, that authenticity is the only currency that actually matters. "Mrs. Emma," one of the kids said last week, "you and Mr. Jake are like proof that real love exists, you know?" Emma laughed, but I saw the tears in her eyes. We'd become accidentally inspirational, not by trying to be perfect, but by being perfectly honest about our imperfections. My relationship with my family has healed. My parents visit regularly now, proud of the man I've become rather than disappointed in the man I was. My sister, who'd stopped speaking to me during the scandal, called last month to say she'd been following my journey and wanted to rebuild our relationship. "You're different now," she said. "You're actually present when we talk. Before, it always felt like you were performing, even with family. The financial struggles are real. I make a fraction of what I used to earn. But Emma and I have discovered that happiness doesn't scale with income. We cook together, paint together, dream together. We measure our wealth in moments, not money. You know what I love most about our life?" Emma said last night as we walked along the beach. "It's completely ours. Not curated for anyone else. Not performed for any audience. Just ours. The hate comments still come occasionally. People who can't forgive my past or accept my growth. But they don't define me anymore. Emma taught me that other people's opinions of me are none of my business. The people who matter don't mind, she always says. And the people who mind don't matter." 3 weeks ago, I got a message that stopped me in my tracks. It was from one of the brands that had dropped me during the scandal. They wanted to work together again, impressed by my redemption arc and authentic engagement. I declined. "Why?" Emma asked when I told her. "Because they want to partner with my story, not my values. They see my growth as content, not character." She smiled and kissed my forehead. "That's how I know you've really changed. If you've made it this far in our story, you're part of something special. This channel isn't about chasing viral moments or perfect content. It's about real stories, real growth, and real connection." Emma and I are building a community where authenticity matters more than algorithms, where your worth isn't measured in followers, and where everyone has a story worth telling. Hit that subscribe button if you want to be part of this mission. Like this video if Emma's story inspired you. Comment and tell us about someone who stood by you when everyone else walked away. And please, share this with someone who needs to remember that their value isn't determined by other people's opinions. Together, we're proving that real influence comes from real love, real truth, and real connection. Welcome to our community. Emma and I can't wait to hear your story. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you were really looking for. And sometimes, the person who saves you is the one who never knew you needed saving. But most importantly, sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering that who you really are is enough.